Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Ministry Matters podcast. My name is Rohan, and along with my wife, Jill, we serve as the lead pastors of a 3-small location multi-site church, C3 Camden, Picton and Thirroul in southwestern Sydney and the Illawarra. On this podcast, Jill and I discuss all matters ministry and share some of the things we've learned and are still learning along the way in our 30 plus years of pastoral ministry experience. It's our particular hope that this podcast will be of help to small church pastors and their teams and encourage you to continue to minister effectively to the wonderful people that God has entrusted into your care. The views that we express on this podcast are our own and not necessarily those of the church or denomination that we're a part of. We'd love to hear from you if you have any feedback, any comments or suggestions on any topics you'd like us to discuss in future episodes. To find out more about us or our church, check out the show notes for links to all the relevant socials and websites. So without any further ado, let's get into today's conversation.
Hello and welcome back to Ministry Matters podcast. It's great to have you with us today.
Hello, everybody.
So we are jumping into the discussion today on the culture of family in church life.
Yeah, very important to have a family feel in church, isn't it? If we're gonna lead a church, especially a small, I think it probably applies to every church, big or small, but it's one of the strengths of a smaller church, I think, is the ability to have a family feel.
Yeah, that's right. And so we're thinking about and have been discussing the biblical basis for the local church, I guess, and what is it? What is the local church comprised of? What is it meant to be about? Is it, what is it? What's it when we look at the expression of the local church? What is it? Is it all about? Is it all about ministry? Is it all about hanging out together? Is it all about prayer and things like that, or like spiritual things?
How about all of the above?
What is it?
Yeah, it's right.
What is it?
I think the Bible, the New Testament itself, uses a variety of different metaphors, and no one of them on their own shows you the full extent of what the church is. I mean, Paul talks about it as a body. He talks about it as a, it's like we're all together in a ship. Like there's fellowship, there's family, there's an army analogy. There's all these different metaphors that all contribute towards helping us get a picture of what the body of Christ, I'm using one of those metaphors right there, but what the church is really all about. Even the word church, what the New Testament church, what the apostles' vision, what Jesus' vision was for this church. I mean, the word church, ecclesia, means called out. It was an assembly. It was a people who came together. It was a Greek word where they came together and they assembled for the purpose of making decisions and how to do civic life. So the church, the early apostles sort of adopted that word to describe what this new group of people was about. And I think if we're going to lead church, it's important that we have some kind of understanding of all aspects of that. And I guess that's what we're going to talk about in these next few podcasts, is how if we don't have a balanced view of all the valid aspects of what church life is about, then we get out of kilter, it actually can become unhealthy quite quickly, can't it?
Yeah, definitely. And so when we just on that, with thinking about what the scriptures say in the New Testament, it says the church met in the temple in the early church, and then they also met from house to house. What else do we know? I'm just thinking we didn't have this in our notes, but I'm just thinking of the things it says that the people did. They met around the apostles' teaching.
Acts 2:42.
Acts 2:42.
Yeah, the apostles' teaching, fellowship, breaking of bread, and prayer.
Yeah, that's right.
So they were the things they devoted themselves to.
That's what it talks about when we talk about that idea of what they devoted themselves to. So I guess what they prioritized in their life. So meeting together, really important.
Yes.
It can't be a church on your own.
No, we can't be on our own. And I guess what meeting together comprises of, like you said, is it just a community club where we just hang out? That's important. Community and family is important. That's what we're going to talk about in this episode in a few minutes. But that alone is not enough. It needs to be more than that. It needs to have it has to have a purpose to it. I think most clubs will have some kind of purpose to them, but we need to make sure that we're more than a club. We have a heavenly purpose.
Yeah, so each church will have its own vision and its own set of principles and ways of operating, and that will be really varied. And that's which it should be, because we're all across the globe. We're a very varied people.
Yes,
and we want
diversity. Even in one town, you've got different kinds of churches, smaller churches, larger churches with a focus on different aspects of the mission field, and that's all well and good. That's beautiful. That's the diverse, manifold wisdom of God. The word manifold, everything from different perspectives all coming together into one. I think that's an important part of healthy church. Don't compare yourself with a church down the road.
Yes, we'll have our own flavour. We'll have our own direction, our own feel.
Totally.
So in Philippians 2:25, tell us what's happening in that scripture.
Well, we should give credit to Pastor Lars Halvorsen. We were sitting with him just over the last couple of days, and he shared this with us, and we've just been talking about it, and actually kind of solidified some of the things we wanted to put in this podcast and some conversations we had. Even as I record this on Monday, we had some conversations with several people in two of our locations where I was at yesterday around this thought. Paul just has this simple statement about Epaphroditus. He says Epaphroditus was from Philippi, and he obviously visited Paul in prison and brought him the gifts that the Philippians had given, and he said, I want to send him back to you. And he just commends him around 3 areas.
Just a little scripture you might read over and not even notice.
And yet it's so good, because he says, I'm commending back to you Epaphroditus, and he describes him in 3 ways. He says he's my brother, he's my co-worker, and he's my fellow soldier. And Pastor Lars just brought this moment of revelation, simple little thought out of these 3. So thank you, Pastor Lars, just around brother, co-worker, fellow soldier. And as we've developed that theme in that, and he said, didn't he? He said he was looking for 3 F's, so he can alliterate it a bit. And he came up with brother is a familial term, so family. Yep. Co-worker means we're all working together in the field. And then fellow soldier, we're in a fight. Yeah. And so he said, to be a balanced person in God's kingdom, and therefore, as Epaphroditus was all 3 of those things, it's a pattern that we as the church should be. If we're going to be healthy, we need to be a family.
Well, that's who he was. That's what he was to Paul.
That's what he was to Paul.
Yeah.
And that's what we see that in the context of the Philippian church that he's writing to as well. So I think as well as that being a pattern for Epaphroditus, it should be a pattern that we as leaders want to have in our departments, in our churches, in our connect groups and so on, is this whole concept of we want to have family. We want to see that we're working together in a field. We actually have work to do, and that it's a fight. And so we thought over these next few episodes, we'll just touch on each of those one at a time, because what we've developed and thought about, and maybe if you take these words and unpack them in your own context, like us, we've gone, well, even though we're a multi-site church, we have a tendency at each different location to have different ones of those, good, but maybe at times at the expense of different ones. And if they're not in balance, then we become unbalanced and we miss out on being and being all that God's called us to be. And so at different times within different locations, within your church, within your group of people that you're responsible for leading, maybe it's a good starting point to ask yourself, how am I going in each 3 of those? What does it look like? Are we a family, which we'll talk about now? Are we a family? Is there a family feel here? Yeah. Or maybe we've got a family feel. That's great, but if we're honest, there's no real sense of feel. We're not really doing anything. We're not going anywhere. Or maybe we're not aware that we're in a fight. Maybe we feel like we're always being battered, and we haven't got a revelation that this is a spiritual fight, and that we stand side by side as fellow soldiers. And so let's just maybe talk. We can see, I think, what happens when we get out of balance there. So let's talk in the next few minutes in this episode around this concept of family feel. You actually shared on this in your preaching yesterday at our Thirroul location, didn't you? A little bit?
Yeah, I shared on more around the area of field and being a co-worker.
You did, yes, that's correct.
So I talked about Jesus sent us
All
into
right.
the
Well, we'll
field.
save that
So we'll save that.
for the next episode then. That's right.
Save
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
So I think it is important if we only think of ourselves as a family, which can be great, which is great, but we lose sight of the fact that there's more. Yeah, any of these on their own, isn't healthy, like you just said. And if we lose sight of the fact that we are co-workers, there is a field to work in, and there is we're all called to the field. We're called to do. There is work.
Yeah.
There is something for us to do, and there is a battle that we be aware of the spiritual world, aware of the what the calling on us to serve and to minister and to be workers. And but family is different, isn't it? Family's like a deep care for one another. It'd be awful to have, it wouldn't be right to all be all about the being fellow soldiers and thinking about the fight and be all about being co-workers and serving, but not have any relationship, not have any family.
Well, that's why I think, I agree with you. I think that's why we need to talk to it in this context, because, for some of you, you'll go, oh, my context, we're a beautiful family and we struggle to actually do anything in the field, but we're a great family feel. And we've had that in different locations. We'll have that feel too. And then at other times, in other contexts, then you might be doing the field work, you might be fighting the fight, but you don't have the family. And, that old television show, Band of Brothers, I mean, I think, it's been shown that on a battlefield, if you don't have that sense of family, that sense of mateship, that sense of camaraderie, relational connection, you're probably not got each other's back. And I think in the field environment, if you're out there working in a field and there's no sense of family, no sense of camaraderie, it just becomes hard work. It just becomes burdensome because you often feel like you're doing it alone. But if you think of Nehemiah, I mean, they built the wall side by side. There was family building together.
Yep.
And that's what, as much as anything, that's what kept them going is, hey, I'll call, if we need you, come here, and we build family by family. And so in this context, maybe let's assume that we're talking to some people who would look at their group of people that they're leading, whether it's a church or whatever, and go, okay, well, I don't feel like we have family. I don't feel like there's a familial connection there. Let's talk to that for these next few minutes in this episode. What are some things we can do to help cultivate family?
Well, I think if we look at the early church, it said they met together regularly, house to house. They broke bread together, so they had time with one another. They prioritized and they carved out space to be with one another. And I think the more we're with one another, engaging in conversation, being in the same space, if you're not a big talker, just being in each other's proximity, then you get to know one another. And there's nothing like knowing another person and being known by another person. And that's what when you look at natural family of origin, we grow up in a house together. We don't usually grow up in proximity to one another. And that's what makes us, blood makes us a family, but being in proximity to one another as well is, one of those strong chords of relational strengths and chords that is holds us together, even when we don't agree, even when we have different perspectives. We're family.
Yes. Yeah.
And
so family, it gives space for different perspectives. There's safety to not have to all think the same about everything, but there's a stronger cord of connection there that holds us together. Yeah. And it can be challenging in small churches. We've often said this, in a bigger church, maybe a lot of your key team, in a large church, maybe a lot of the key team where you're really wanting to foster family to get things done at that level, maybe you're all on staff, so you're hanging out together during the week in paid staff environments, all that sort of stuff. In smaller churches, that's not necessarily the case. I can think of a few things. I could look at all this and go, the cards are stacked against us because we are a smaller church. We're 3 smaller churches, so we don't get as much time as family. Some of our churches have got more time for that than others. Like I think our Picton church has a good family feel because everyone's largely semi-rural kind of feel, so there's a lot of that going on there. But for us, we find that, it's not always easy. So it's hard to spend time with people. That's the first thing. The second thing is we're multi-site. So we've got 3 small churches. So that adds up to sort of mid-sized churching, and that has a different dynamic to it. And also too much of just our geography, and that won't exist for everybody, but where we are, we have a lot of people travel. We're on the outskirts of the city, so people are time poor because they're traveling for work and so on. So all those things are stacked against creating a culture of family just because of what you said, proximity and time, really. We don't have that. And so I think it requires some level of intentionality to make it feel like family.
Well, why don't you jump in now? We didn't have this in the notes, but I'm going to challenge you. What do you think about that? You've just said all the reasons why it can be challenging, but why do you not just discount it then and go, well, it's just all too hard? What is it? It's within you that says, I know that I need to be part of the family.
Because I know for me that, well, one, it's 2 reasons come to mind, as you said. The first thing is I know I need it. Mm-hmm. I know I need to feel family. But secondly, I know that we cannot run an effective, vibrant church without family. Mm. So I'm going to want to do everything I can to prioritize that. And if that requires, extra having people in our home when we're tired, extra meetings, even if hey, get on Zoom if you have to, but just find ways to connect, do some fun things together so that it's not all field related. Yeah. I think there needs to be time when it's family and relationally related. If it's only ever field related, if it's only ever mission work focused, it will become dry. It needs to be set. It needs to be tempered with family. So I think for me, I'll take every opportunity I can. If I'm chatting with people after church, I want to hear their world. I want to ask them about their world. So get into their world.
Just talking to them about the next thing you want them to do or the next area you want them to serve in, or asking them about themselves.
Asking them about themselves.
Show interest in them.
Getting into their world. And I think that's often what's missing is that sense of how do we actually get to know each other? We can't. It's very hard to build family on a Sunday. It can be done, but it's challenging because we've got all kinds of other things going on in our life. But some simple things are actually asking people get into their world. I've had some conversations with different ones of our small groups lately, and some of the feedback is that we're not getting below the surface.
Right.
As a group, they're probably not forming family because they're not getting below the surface. And so I think it takes a leader to actually go in and go, hey, people, whether it's men, women, whatever, hey, people, what's going on here? Let's go a little bit deeper. And as a leader, help facilitate that and create a culture that says it's okay to go a bit deeper with our lives and talk about our challenges and talk about what's God saying to us about our lives and cultivating a bit of a culture of prayer for one another.
That's a good point, because I think sometimes in groups, there can be, when you think about group dynamics and group facilitation skills, which is actually a good thing for people to learn a little bit of if they are in a group and they're not aware of that. You can sometimes have, you can have the stronger personality, or the person that talks the most can tend to dictate what happens in the group, and that might not be the leader. And so you ended up having a bit of a culture set in a group because someone's a talker or someone's a strong personality, and they might be very conclusive about what they think is the norm, and then it shuts down other people.
Shuts down other people,
and then a group
about their
won't
own
be
challenges.
willing to. Won't feel like I'm safe enough or I've got permission to share. So that's probably something to be careful of. We can have we can be a church with lots of groups, but if there's not a culture built in the groups where people can, where it's understood that we're allowed to express where we're at here without someone else saying, over spiritualizing a response to us or telling us that's not valid or telling us that we're wrong or whatever. I think that's important to establish.
So that's a group facilitation. I think there's another thing to put on our podcast. There's the whole idea of group facilitation skills. Mind you, it's hard to learn those skills in a podcast. We can give you some tips, but it does take time. It's different to teaching. It's a whole different skill set.
Because people can be in a group for years and not go below the surface.
Never go below the surface.
And I know as well, I think, even if you're in a meeting or if you're in a team with someone or you do have proximity, if you are, I'm just thinking of this myself, I've had things that I've been a part of where I felt like, I don't really enjoy that because I don't feel like I've gotten to know people or people have gotten to know me. And and it's all about the topic. It's all about, let's just talk about the topic. Let's just talk about whatever the purpose of the meeting is. And I understand there are meetings we need to have purpose.
Yes,
for
you need to have field meetings. You can't just
we need
all
to
have
field
family meetings.
It's not family meetings. But if that's all there ever is, and there's no time for let's just kick back and talk about and let's hang out when there's no field or fight focus, where we can just totally decompress. What can we have some fun? I mean, they must have had fun in the early church. There must have been an element of, let's just go out, let's go hang out and do something recreational. Let's enjoy creation together. Let's go for a walk together. Let's, go for a meal together, and let's just totally, lessen that intensity. I think things just can get way too intense in church life.
Yeah, definitely. So we want to be able to create that and cultivate that. It takes intentionality. One of the things that I've often said is, excuse me, I think at times, I find, if you're running leaders meetings and key team meetings and so on, a lot of that is field-based, especially for me because I'm so focused, task-focused. But some of the most precious family moments that we've had, even within our movement with other pastors, that we've felt like, oh, wow, these people are our family, these people get us, and then with our own teams, is where you do kind of blend a bit of field and family. I've often said, we've done this a couple of times. I've often said things like, I'd rather have, twice a year with 24 hours with all our key team together and lock ourselves down for 24 hours, take a day leave or whatever, and have a Friday night and all day Saturday, or maybe Friday afternoon, Friday night, Saturday. Do that twice a year. I reckon that has potential to build a healthier family culture than just a weekly or even a monthly team meeting where it's less often. But I think I know for me, if I got a little bit of field conversation, but then I'm sitting down over a meal, having dinner with people, and we're just continuing that conversation because maybe we'd done a bit of a round table and we'd thrashed it out. But it's like now we just
you can share your perspective and your thought, and your reflection,
and you can hear others, and you can reflect back, and it's just time. It's literally just and what it's doing is we may not solve the issue of the field, but I feel like I know that person. I've gone below the surface because I've had a chance to see how they apply their faith in that field environment. So a blending of field and family can be good, to just take some time and get away and have some fun and have a mixture of conversation and fun and do that kind of stuff. It can cultivate family. So I think the thing is, don't just allow every meeting that you're in with those you lead to be field focused. Find a way to go and create family culture.
Yeah, that's right. And it is something we have to consider, I think, planning meetings while we're on the thing of meetings about field and, which is about being co-workers. If we're having work meetings, I don't think we should just make it open-ended and let everybody pour out their hearts and, and share everything. There is a degree whereby we have to be mindful of oversharing and what's appropriate for that context.
Once again, that's a facilitation skill that a leader needs to have, isn't it?
Because otherwise we can discourage, or people get frustrated and lose patience with that. There'll be people who've gone, I don't have time for this. This is not what I signed up for. So I think we've got to be careful about, again, in family, because we are to bear one another's burdens and to walk with one another in as family in church, and we will walk through challenging things with people, but I don't think we can let that dominate. Whether the major thing we celebrate or when we mourn, and we give that appropriate value,
but not inappropriate value.
But I think we need to be careful that it doesn't actually dominate and kill the field.
Well, once again, it comes back to this balance.
Co-work.
It comes back to this balance thing, is that all things in the right context, in the right balance, are helpful, but any one thing can get out of sync quickly. And as leaders, we do need to be able to have some tips and some skills to know how to appropriately keep any kind of meeting going in the direction that we want to go, so that we are balancing family, field, and
sometimes I think we don't know what to do, especially if there's emotion that comes to us the surface. know this myself. I've seen both sides of this when I've not known what to do as a leader. When there's emotion, I remember running a group one time, and there was someone that was emotional the whole time. Like it really, and I had no idea what to do as the leader of that group. I just thought, well, I guess I thought, well, the right thing to do is just to minister to this person. So we ended up just spending so much time with this person, but it was week in, week out, the same thing. And I realised after a period of time, as a very inexperienced young leader, that I wasn't going to be able to keep these people coming to this meeting if that's all we did. Yeah. So it was like a really, really challenging thing for a young leader. You're very good at this
now, though.
But I think, and I've also been the person who's cried, who's turned up at things. This is not just about crying, but it's been the emotional one, whatever. But I've been walking through some things where I've been the emotional
some dark times.
But I've realised, and I've noticed good leadership and how I was led, how I was directed in some of those things, and how actually there is a way that you can lovingly support someone and then move on.
So make them feel like family, but say that this isn't necessarily the context to carry on.
Yeah, I don't think you don't even have to say that. I just think you talk to it a little bit, pray for them, and then
move on.
Segue to the next thing, and then you revisit, come back to them later and talk to them, and you could say to them outside the meeting later, I'm happy to help you with this. Let's bring some other, let's talk about this.
Doesn't have to all be dealt with in the context with everybody there. There needs to be enough connection to feed the family that we're all in this together, but then be able to go, okay, now if we only focus on this, it will be dysfunctional. It's like you can't have a healthy family if the whole family is focused on one person.
But I think we'd be really insensitive on the other side of it, where if we didn't give any space to that,
that's correct.
And in our co-work, in our field, in our area of serving together, if we just ignored people's present dramas and issues and things that they're carrying and the things that they're bringing.
Well, that actually will have an adverse effect on everybody else too, because the genuine compassion people will go, this isn't healthy. We need to show care and concern. Yeah. So we need the wisdom. James says if we lack wisdom, ask God. We do need wisdom for these things. I'm just looking at one other thing I think in my notes that I've got here, we're getting close to time, is that I think we've done this together. I've certainly done this at times, is in the area of, let's take the area of family. Like, if our church is not got as much of a family feel at different seasons as perhaps it has in the past or we'd like it to have, I think inviting key people into that and asking them, trust the people, and saying, hey, tell me, what are your thoughts on our sense of community here? What do you think's going on? And inviting them in, asking them what's working, what's not working. And as a secure leader, we can be comfortable with that. We don't have to, doesn't mean we have to take on everything everybody says, but genuinely, haven't we found that, especially if talking to those of us that are senior leaders, we're often the last ones to know anything, aren't we? People will share things amongst themselves or share things with other people before they tell us. Now, we don't want to be those kind of leaders. We want people to feel like they can come to us with anything. But generally speaking, they won't always do that. So if you've got the two or three, and there might not even be leaders in your church, but they're not everybody who's the key influencer is a leader. There are actually people in the church who people will go to, who have the voice, have the ear of the people and so on. So I think having those people and entrusting them enough to say, what do you think's working? What do you think's not working? What are you hearing on the ground? What do you think we could do? How could we cultivate family together so that then once again there's more of a groundswell of people buying into that rather than just us trying to drive family, because you can't, mum can do this. We're having dinner at 6 o'clock Wednesday night. You'll be here come hell or high water. The kids might be there. The teenagers and young adult kids might be there, but they're going to be there under sufferance. It's not necessarily going to, we're turning the TV off. We will have dinner time together. We will have communication. Well, we all know that's not going to feed family, is it? You can't drive family. It needs to be more ad hoc. It needs to be more relational.
Yeah, and I have heard it said, and I think it's just probably right, I would agree with it, that post-pandemic, in the human psyche, it's more, people are a little bit more reluctant to get together socially. They're a bit more uncomfortable with social interaction, because there was certainly in a lot of our, in our context, we had 2 years, a large part of 2 years of being locked down, not being a normal life with other people, and some people that there's still fallout from that.
Yeah, there's still health issues for people that are still.
We probably have become less social than we used to be. And that's something to add in as well that we need to be mindful of. It does take intentionality. We won't, maybe we I think the trend can be as soon as a meeting's over, let's jump let's rush to the car and get home as quick as possible because I need some downtime. Whereas we may have previously gone, who wants to go out for a coffee or a drink or dinner or whatever. We have a bit more sense of, I've got space for that. But something about post-pandemic makes us think, right, I'm done. I need to get home. I need to get my isolation back again.
Totally, yeah. So that's almost built into the psyche. Well, one of the things where our Picton location has done really well is they have these long table lunches, and they had them before COVID, then they stopped them for COVID and just recently started them again. Everyone just brings this little potluck, isn't it? Yeah. But, part of that is being a semi-rural community, but what it does is it does create those opportunities for conversation. And so I think just constantly drip feeding those sorts of ideas will all feed family. They will all feed into every conversation with someone across a meal. The Jewish context is all around meals. The book of Luke is set around feasts. It's actually four feasts that the whole book is, four meals basically that Jesus is, the whole context. Luke's set it around it's 4 times where he's having meals with people. He's in different houses and so on. But it's intentional because that was deeply entrenched into Jewish psyche that family, relationship, community was built over meals. I don't think that has really changed.
No, and some people have the gift of hospitality and they will just absolutely thrive in this space. It's good for us to look out for those people and engage them and get them to, be helping with make that happen. For the rest of us, you've always said this, there's always a barbecue chicken from Woolies and throw some sausages on the barbecue.
She used to tell me off for saying that. I used to say from the pulpit, you can always just do barbecue chicken and chips from Woolies with bread rolls. Or chips and bread rolls and all that sort of stuff. And you used to tell me off for that. But then you met a few pastors who are very good at doing that themselves.
Well, what I'm trying to say is don't think, this is going to be overwhelming and too hard. Yeah. Think of, we're all looking for shortcuts. We're all looking for keep it simple.
Yeah, so, exactly. You're not having to roll out the fine dining every time. But if that's an issue and you feel like you've got, maybe the field is hard work, but you don't have family, then we would say, as we wrap up this podcast, spend some time focusing on family. Talk to a few in your team. Say, let's just take the next several months. Let's not focus too much on field. Let's focus on family.
Yeah.
That'd be a good name for a Christian organisation. Let's focus on the family. Let's just get together and go, this is our goal, is to try to incorporate as many people into a family feel so that when they come to church, they're not just a bunch of people all thrust together. They actually know each other and they enjoy one another's
just
company.
On that, I know we're over time, but it's, Scripture says that God sets the lonely among families. Yeah. So we might have a few people in our friendship group who we quite like hanging out with, and that's fine, that's great. Let's invite in let's invite in those who may not be, we might just not feeling necessarily inclined to. It might not be our default.
It's often singles.
But let's think about that.
Yep.
Yep. Some people feel like, they never get invited. We used to be like that because we had a big family. So there were 7 of us. We used to be like, no one invites us over because it's a big deal to invite 7 people over. It's the same for people who might be on their own. It's the same for, there's different reasons why it might be hard work, but we're going to overcome those things because this is what the gospel is.
This is what family is all about.
This is what family is.
Yeah, one other free tip that we will be talking about, new people follow up and all that sort of stuff. But this is one tip that I've used so many times myself. I'll be talking to somebody and maybe they're in conversation with me and I see someone else who I want to get to, and I'll actually say to the person, come and let's go and meet this person. Or after I'm talking to a new person, I'll call someone over and do an introduction. I think that principle can happen after church in a cafe environment, but it can also happen over a meal. Like invite someone new. If you're the connecting person and you're always connecting with people, some people don't know how to initiate conversation, but invite a couple over or invite a single person over, but also invite someone who they don't know over and help them facilitate connection themselves. So you don't have to be the source of all the relationship. Our goal is to build family. It's not just about everyone relating to us as the pastors or us as the leaders. It's about helping to facilitate a relationship among each other. And we can facilitate that without having to be the person who everyone looks to as, you're the only person I relate to in this church. That's not healthy, is it?
No, that's right.
Okay then. Anything else you want to add there?
That's great. No, that's awesome.
All right, good.
Cool.
That's the end of this episode.
Thanks,
then, folks.
Everyone.
See you next time.
See you soon.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Ministry Matters podcast. Hey, if this podcast has been an encouragement to you or you think it could be to others, we'd be so grateful if you'd share it with your friends on the socials. So before you head back into your day, if you could take a moment to like our Facebook and Instagram pages and share them with your friends, that would be awesome. You can find us by searching @Ministry Matters Podcast, all one word. And one last thing that just helps the podcast algorithm to work for us. We'd really appreciate it if you could take a minute to rate and review our podcast. Be sure to click that follow button wherever you listen to your podcasts so every new episode will be loaded straight to your device. And for those of you watching on YouTube, be sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you know when a new episode drops. All the links you need are in the show notes. So thanks so much for being with us today, and we look forward to talking to you in the next episode.